So something I realized about myself the other day is that when someone annoys me, I tend to automatically assume two things. One, they're doing so intentionally, and two, they know that what they're doing annoys me. In other words, I'm just assuming that they're being mean. But what I've come to realize is that more often than not, people are ignorant as opposed to malevolent. In other words, they're not trying to be mean, but they're just simply unaware of the fact that what they're doing annoys you. And so if this is the case, how do you get around that? And I think the answer is very simple. I think the answer is confrontation. So confrontation is actually the topic of this video today, which falls under the second pillar of wellness, which is heart. In other words, relationships, emotions, and stuff like that. Now, confrontation is super important for three primary reasons. Number one, when you confront someone, it's really good for yourself. Right? Because if you don't confront someone, and if someone's annoying you or being mean to you or hurting you in some way or another, if you don't tell them that, you're just going to suppress all your emotions and all your anger, and that's going to eventually come out in weird, unhealthy ways, right? So you're just going to feel uncomfortable, suppressed, and you're going to feel like you want to turn your shoulder to them and not really have a relationship with them anymore. Confronting someone is very liberating for the person who's being bothered. The second reason why confrontation is super important and actually a really good thing is that it's good for the person being confronted, right? Because, for example, if I were someone who was being annoying to someone else, or if I was being mean to someone else, and I didn't know that I was doing that, I would really want that person to tell me so that I can adjust my ways to fit their needs and their wants. And something that happens actually when confrontation doesn't occur is that the person who needs to be confronted for being annoying in some way or another, they tend to actually get the short end of the stick because the person that they're annoying tends to actually start being rude to them or mean to them for reasons that they can't tell, for reasons that the person who started it doesn't really understand, right? And so it's much better to know the reasons why someone is being annoyed or hurt as opposed to just simply guessing and as opposed to dealing with the anger and frustration of that person in other ways. Now, the third reason that confrontation is super important is that it's good for both parties. It's good for the relationship. Confrontation is actually just a kind of intense word for communication. And if you can't be, trustworthy or open or authentic with people, again, it doesn't matter who it is, a friend, a significant other, then by definition of a relationship, you don't even have one with that person, right? Because a relationship requires communication and a little bit of sacrifice in some way and a little bit of understanding in another way. And everyone has their own perspectives and their own, pet peeves. And if you can't be open about that, then things just won't ever work. So those are the three primary reasons why confrontation is super important, but there's actually one extra little piece that I think is probably the most important, and that's that when you confront someone, you're being vulnerable. You're being vulnerable with them. And vulnerability is something that's actually really scary, right? Because going back to the ignorant versus malevolent thing, if you're being vulnerable and confronting someone about the issue, if that person on the off chance that they are actually just being mean, then you're gonna, cause a whole fight and you're gonna cause, a lot of tension. And, the other side is, if the person actually is just ignorant of what they're doing, then being vulnerable through confrontation still will result in a little bit of friction and a little bit of, discomfort for a little while until those things can be worked out. So confrontation is a very vulnerable thing. It requires you to put yourself out there and value, the way you feel with regards to how that person is treating you. And that's really scary because you don't know how that can go. But vulnerability is the biggest step towards authenticity and the biggest step towards a healthy relationship. If you can't be vulnerable with someone, then you're not being real. You're not being honest with yourself or with that person. And for a true relationship to work, again, whether it's a family member or a friend, you have to tell them how you feel. So anyway, a few takeaways from this video is that more often than not, people are ignorant of the problem as opposed to malevolent, as opposed to just being mean. And this is something that I've kind of realized myself, but something that I wanted to point out, that clinical psychologist Jordan Peterson actually writes about this in his book, 12 Rules for Life. An Antidote to Chaos. And so he actually expands on this idea very well in his book, so I highly suggest you check it out. But point being, if you assume that someone's ignorant as opposed to malevolent, that'll give you the ability to confront them and make things better. Anyway, I'm Matthew. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please leave a like, please leave a comment, and subscribe if you want to stay up to date with the content we're putting out here. And I'll see you guys in the next one.